Hi, Teresa. It's great to connect today. Years ago, when I interviewed Amy Resneski, she suggested I talk to you. So I'm grateful that we could connect today.
Yes, this is great. And I'm so pleased that Amy passed my name along. And I am a huge fan of her work. So I'm honored that she said I'd be a good candidate for this.
And in the meantime, we figured out that my colleague here at KU, Patty Dom, is a colleague of yours as well. So it was cool to make that connection.
Yes, yes. Patty and I, from her doctoral days at the University of Minnesota, and we're still collaborators and co-authors, and it's been a wonderful academic collaboration.
So as you think about the academic work you've done and all of the things you've learned from your research, what have you learned that you would most like to pass on to others?
I'd love to back up a little and start with a story because I've got a couple of things that I want to share, but I think it's kind of an interesting way that I can structure my remarks. So
Yeah, great.
when my kids were little, they're off at college now, but when my kids were little, I used to drop them off at school, and before I parted, I would say to them, work hard, have fun, choose kind, and be present. Work hard, have fun, choose kind, be present. And some time ago, I was approached to give a TEDx talk at the University of Minnesota, and I was like, how am I going to make sense of these decades of research? And it kind of hit me like a lightning bolt that that little family motto, those four themes, work hard, have fun, choose kind, be present, are things that I had been doing research on. And so that's what I'm going to kind of share with you, and maybe just a little nugget from each of those things. Is that
That's
okay?
great. Yeah, perfect.
All right, great. Okay, so let me start with kind of the work hard. So in some of my research where we looked at mood and work events, we found that one of the key drivers of being in a good mood at work was making meaningful progress on your work tasks, right? So it's kind of that you're making progress. Teresa Mabala talks about the progress principle, kind of same idea. Um, but the problem with so many people's work environments are like they're just constantly being pulled from thing to thing and interruptions. And so one of the things that I like to do in my own work and that I suggest to others is this notion of parking downhill. So if you can envision a car parked downhill, think about what's going to happen when you take your foot off the brake. You're going to get going, you're going to pick up speed, you're going to pick up momentum. But most of us don't park downhill with respect to our work. We open our computers, we get sucked into email, we do little busy work, and we get to the afternoon and we're like, oh my God, I didn't get anything done today. So if you park downhill, here's what it looks like for me. I think about what do I need to tackle first thing? Do I need to review a paper or write on an article, or do I need to read a student's dissertation or whatever that thing is, or work on a lecture? And I have that open on my computer, ready to go first thing in the morning. And I work on that for a period of time. And it just puts you kind of in that good mood state where you've already made progress on some meaningful work right out of the gate. And even if the rest of the day gets kind of nibbled away by other things, at least I've had that core thing. So that idea of parking downhill and really being intentional and thinking about what you're going to work on. In my home life, we have used this with we used to have like when my kids were at home, we used to have like a Sunday night meeting. So we'd have a meeting to get really intentional about the work week and what was happening for that week. So I think thinking about that, being careful about how you architect your day and spending some of that time, parking downhill right in the morning so you can really get going on your work tasks.
So are you saying you don't open up Instagram, the New York Times, or X first thing, or do you like indulge yourself for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, and then get to work?
Well, I wouldn't say that like it's the first thing I do. I'll like make myself a cup of tea. I try really hard to sort of look out into nature first thing in the morning. But like when I'm settling down into work is kind of what I'm saying. Once I'm doing that, and I will also say that I might be lying a little bit because sometimes I'm department chair now, and so sometimes I will look at email on my phone because I hate answering any email on my phone just to make sure that nothing's blowing up,
Yeah.
and that I'm not preventing someone from making progress on their own work. But then I really do try and kind of get into it. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I have a morning, early morning meetings or things like that. But it's that night before really thinking about what's that thing that I want to tackle and
Yeah.
being kind of maniacally focused on that for the rest of the day.
I love the metaphor, park downhill. So
Yeah.
such a great metaphor. Okay,
Yeah.
great
And
advice.
there's another, maybe if I can just add one other thing that comes from another piece of research, and this was some research that I did um, on interruptions with colleague Sophie Leroy. And she has this concept of attention residue, where like you switch tasks and you think your attention has gone with you and it hasn't. Your attention's like still working on the other task. And in some of our research, we put together just a really simple thing. We called it the Ready to Resume plan. And so as you're switching tasks or when you're interrupted or someone comes into your office and interrupts you, just take a moment and write down where you were and how you're going to resume that work. Like what were you working on? How were you struggling? And that simple ready to resume plan really mitigates the negative effects of interruptions. And in fact, there's a great story about Ernest Hemingway, who used to stop writing in the middle of a sentence because he knew exactly how he was going to pick up that work. So it's kind of an example of that ready to resume. But I think both of these are about like how do you be intentional about your work and kind of getting going and getting momentum and getting traction on that. Let me talk about the have fun. So in research that we did on mood at work and work events, one of the things that we found was that even though work events are way more frequent, it's the negative things that pack a punch, right? So this has been talked about as the asymmetry effect or the bad is stronger than good effect. And we showed that this really works in work environments as well. And this always troubled me because we're at work, we got all kinds of good stuff happening, but we let the bad stuff really outweigh. We got all this good stuff that we leave on the table. So how do we pivot people to focus on the good things? And that sort of led us into this research on the three good things and bringing that into a work organization. And so in the research, we showed that when people reflected on good things that happened in their workday and why they happened, they had lower stress, they had fewer physical complaints, fewer mental complaints. In the evening, they could detach from their work, and it even lowered their blood pressure. So good stuff from focusing on the positive things. And so one of the things that I like to do is, when my kids were little, I would write down like funny things they said or did every day. And now when we read those reports,
Oh
I
yeah,
just howl. But
treasure.
really taking the time to sort of reflect on that, either journal on that, think about, I like this idea of we all have like a to-do list, but thinking about make an I did list, right? Like, what are the things that you actually accomplished in a day? What were some of the things that you were excited about, that you were passionate about? Our brains go to the negative automatically. We don't need any help with that. But thinking about, that you had 20 things happen to you and 19 of them went really well. And, let's focus on those 19 because our brains want us to focus on that one. So the thing is to really find ways either by journaling or maybe sharing them with others to celebrate those work successes. And I think I am pretty intentional about doing that. And back to my kids again, sharing work with our children. I'm actually doing some research on that right now, but thinking about how often we are communicating messages to our kids about like, oh, work's this terrible thing. I got to go to work. Oh no. And, I was always, when my kids were little, really intentional about showing them a comment from a student or, hey, look at this article or here's what I'm working on. And so I think finding the positive things that are in our work environments. And that's not taking away that sometimes there are bad jobs out
Right.
there, but trying to find and refocus on the positive. So that's the have fun. The choose kind. So choosing kind, obviously that's just good practice, but our research in looking at, we did some experience sampling research, and one of the things that we found was this interesting pattern about, people were in bad moods and then they helped another person and then they were in a good mood. So bad mood, help another person, put you in a good mood. Helping others had a mood repair effect, and this effect was particularly pronounced for people who were more extroverted. And so this idea of how can you find ways um, to help another person, especially if you're not in a great mood. Just find somebody to help. Uh, think about, are there ways that I can elevate someone every day in conversation It might even be just a small social interaction, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be, it could be a small thing. It could be reinforcing what someone says in a meeting. It could be complimenting someone. It could be whatever it is. But the benefits are not just for the other person, but the benefits are for your own well-being as well. So that's something that I think we can all try and do. And then the last one is be present. There is a lot of research and energy around sort of being more mindful at work and how do we bring that full presence. The way that I think about it is our attention is just under assault,
Mhm.
right? Our attention is absolutely under assault. And I'm playing with this idea right now of AQ, attention quotient. So you think about IQ and EQ, and I think the next big thing is AQ. What's your attention quotient? Can you stabilize your attention to an object? Can you pay attention to the right things? Can you transition your attention? So really thinking about how we protect and cultivate that. But with respect to being present, I think that obviously there's long traditions in meditation and mindfulness that are out there, but a lot of people are not necessarily going to gravitate to those or spend the time on those. And so I like to think about how do I bring a more mindful presence into my day-to-day actions? And sometimes they're very routine actions, right? It could be something like, how do you walk really mindfully to a meeting so that rather than blasting in there, after looking at your phone and running down the hall late, like how do you just put your phone away, mindfully walk to the meeting so that you're going to arrive in a really different mental state. Or, thinking about when you're having your lunch, we're all eating our lunch in front of our computers or whatever, but like taking a moment to just really enjoy that. Or washing your hands mindfully, like doing really small practices in a mindful way. And especially it will change how we show up with others. And some other research we did, we worked in a healthcare clinic and we did an active control intervention where the healthcare workers either listened to a mindfulness meditation or they listened to like a wellness podcast. And we were with these workers for about a period of 3 weeks. And what we were interested in is not the effects for the individual, but the effects on the patients. And what we found was the patients reported that the people that they interacted with were more attentive, they were more responsive, they could take their perspective. And so I think the power of just bringing a more full presence to your work life is in improved relationships with others at work. And so those are just some of the things that I like to do, that I bring into my not just my work life, but my home life and my family life. And I really think sometimes you can have small changes in your life and they have a big impact. And so try something, do it consistently, put in a new habit, put in a new, practical discipline, and I think you'll see the effects of that.
Yeah, this is great coming from somebody who has studied work for so long and how to make it meaningful and enjoyable and make work good. So I love this framework and I really want to apply this. So especially like the I'll have to edit this out. Every once in a while I'll edit things.
That's okay.
I especially want to apply the list of things I've done to help me focus on like progress I've made and things that I enjoy because it's just so weird. Like I don't know if it's because one, I guess just because I'm human, it's easy to focus on the negative. Two, I went to law school, and law school I think kind of trains you to like be skeptical, and then even in like PhD training, right? We're supposed to be, skeptical consumers. And so it's so easy for me to like somebody asks me about my job, it's like, oh, the research is hard, or like the journal process sometimes feels subjective. And there's so much good, and there's so many amazing things that we can choose to focus on. It doesn't mean we ignore the negative, but I'm gonna try to do this. Like I'm like every
Yeah.
night, I'm gonna write this down. I'm gonna think about what progress did I make, what do I like, what did I like, and see how this changes my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so often the metaphor I like to think about is so often our jobs feel like we're digging a hole in water. And right. And so, it's just this constant stuff. And so I really do think though that when you take a step back and say like, oh, actually, what did I do and what progress have I made? And I think that's a helpful thing when you can sit back at the end of a day, a week, or even the end of the year when we're, looking and reflecting on the past year. You go, okay, wait, I actually got some things done and I made a difference in people's lives and I, feel a sense of purpose. And so it's not always just this what's next, cross it off the list.
Especially if we're choosing kind, trying to help people, another way to help us with that. I love the metaphor. Yeah, digging a hole in water. What a great visual. And then this idea of the attention quotient. I've never heard that. I think that's really interesting. And it's something to think about. Like, if we think abstractly, like, yeah, I don't want to get distracted, but what does that mean? But I really like, okay, there is an attention quotient that I want to be good at. I want to be
Yeah,
good at
yeah.
managing my attention. And so this is another thing that I'm going to think about and try to apply. Well, Teresa, this is so great. Any final words you'd like to share as we wrap up here?
Oh, nope. Just work hard, have fun, choose kind, be present.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Teresa.
Thank you.